For so many years, I had a really, really unhealthy attitude towards relapsing. I'd go online, I'd go on YouTube, and I'd watch some video by some guy telling me, look, you've not lost your progress, don't worry too much, just watch this video, build up some motivation again, and sort of go again, right? And those three ways in which I completely messed up my own mind and actually stayed stuck way longer than necessary in a porn addiction. So three massive mistakes I made when it came to actually relapsing. Now, the first thing is triggers. Let's talk about triggers, because in the past, I believe there were like certain situational triggers. Maybe I had coursework at university that was due, and when that deadline was approaching, I'd feel a lot of stress, and I'd kind of tell myself, well, I've got this coursework due. That's kind of the situational trigger. And then maybe I'd look to some emotional triggers, and I'd think, well, I need to deal with my stress better. There were times in my life I'd feel very lonely. I'd think, oh, well, this problem's about the loneliness and the disconnection from others. Or I'd look to the environmental trigger, and I'd think, well, it's because maybe my phone was right next to my bed, and that's what led to me relapsing. So I'd kind of identify these triggers, maybe write them down, and then start to change my process. And maybe I'd start to go online and learn how to deal with loneliness. I actually bought a book on loneliness once from the library. I actually owe that book to the library still, so I hope they don't come after me. But anyway, I once bought a book on loneliness because I thought like that was the emotional trigger that I needed to deal with to solve the porn addiction. And I remember many times like hiding my phone away in the cupboards and like locking myself out of my phone and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff to try and deal with these triggers, because I thought that was the cause for the relapse. I was completely wrong, because essentially what was going on is I had the desire to watch porn. I wanted to engage in that compulsive behaviour, and I'd have certain thoughts, and there was a space between that desire and how I actually acted on that desire. And what I really needed to be taught was how to deal with those specific thoughts. That's what the Beyond Compulsion method, which I use, is all about. It's all about focused on sort of about changing the thought patterns and responding to what we call the addicted part of the mind. You have that moment, you do really want to engage in that behavior. And what happens is the addicted part of the mind comes up with reasons, some kind of justification, rationalization to engage in the behavior. So it starts to say, oh, well, it's because you've been triggered. Oh, it's because you're lonely. It's because you've got this deadline at university. It looks for the reason, but that's not the actual reason that you're choosing to engage. The reason you're engaging is because you're letting the addicted part of the mind take control. Like, this is what I did in the past. I was letting the addicted part of the mind take control, and I believed in these lies, which just weren't actually like serving me in any way. Like, it just held me back so much. So I had so much ineffective thinking going on. I'd say to myself in these moments, oh, well, this isn't that bad. It's going to be the last time. It doesn't really count as porn. I'd be on like Instagram scrolling, like looking at models, like, oh, this isn't porn. This is fine. Tell myself, I'm triggered. That's why. Oh, today's been stressful. I'll just start again tomorrow. Maybe I'd say, I don't care. Everyone does it. It's normal. It's not that bad, that kind of thing. So I'd have all this ineffective thinking going on. And that's what actually led to me choosing to engage and staying stuck in that addictive cycle. The second sort of way in which I went wrong was I'd have so much compassion for myself. And it sounds weird, because I'm not here to tell you like, oh, you're a failure, you're a loser for relapsing to porn. I honestly don't believe that. I don't even believe this problem has that much to do with like your identity or who you are. Instead, I think it's to do with your thought patterns and changing those. But anyway, I'd have all this compassion for myself. And I remember this one time relapsing really badly, like binging, edging, and I was feeling terrible. And I'd learned a lot about like self-compassion. So I remember lighting some candles, and I made like a shit ton of pasta. I had this like pasta with this tomato sauce. I had some cheese and some chicken in it, and I had this massive bowl of pasta. These candles were lit, and I think I was just like, oh, I feel so sorry for myself, and I just lay back and watch Netflix for like hours on my sofa, just eating a copious amount of pasta. And it was just so messed up. Like, I was so deep in the addiction, I couldn't even see that, accepting this behavior in my life wasn't doing me any good. Like, I'd got to a position where I'd almost started to believe that I just was this addict, and like this just was this problem I had to live with for the rest of my life. And so compassion to myself was somewhat the answer. But that's so crazy because we don't change until our desire to change is greater than our desire to stay the same. And so I'm not here to say, like, look, there's something wrong with you down to the core. It's not about feeling even more shame, but it's about accepting, like, yeah, I've chosen to engage in this behaviour. Like, I've relapsed, and that's really, really, like, messing up my mind. I don't want to accept this into my life. So it's not about, hating on yourself or fueling any further shame or getting out of control and, saying, oh, well, I've already relapsed, I'm going to do it more and more and more. But it's also not about sort of telling yourself, like, oh, this is fine. Like, I'm okay with this. Like, don't be okay with it. Like, this is a serious problem. Instead, you want to write down how shit this actually makes you feel. Because unless you face the reality of your own mind, you're not really going to change things. You're just going to kind of stay the same. So there's nothing wrong with you, but what we want to do is just kind of change the thought pattern. Because in the past, I used to say, like, oh, relapsing is really hard. I should now be kind to myself. And that's when I'd make the pasta and watch the Netflix for hours. But instead, just changing this thought pattern into, like, yeah, relapsing is really hard. Like, this does feel shit. I want to make a change. Like, I'm not okay with this. I do want to make a change, and then seek a solution to change how you think about things, change the sort of rationalizations going on in your mind, like understand what's going on in the mind, deal with the addictive part of the mind correctly, and then get to enjoy, like, living your life without this problem in your life. The third way in which I went wrong in the past was the motivation, the sort of nofap willpower approach, where I'd kind of say, like, oh, all right, this is it now. I quit. I'm going to take control once and for all. I'm never going to do this again. And I'd be really excited for the new nofap streak, all sort of ready to go. And I'd sort of dive into the self-improvement, start to go to the gym more, maybe meditate more, read some books. This would usually only last like a few days, and then I'd be back with the inevitable moment of compulsive desire where I'd really, really want to engage again. And because I'd gone all in on, like, self-improvement, and I kind of thought that was going to help me somehow, it's almost like I believed I'd made some progress when I'd actually made zero change in my neural pathways. Like, I hadn't changed how do I actually think about this choice, because it is a choice, right? It's not like you're completely powerless. You may feel like that if the addictive part of the mind is in control right now, and maybe you've not had the right education on dealing with this problem. But when you really break it down, and maybe you've had the right education, you come to understand, like, this is a choice, and there is going to be these desires, and there's nothing wrong with you for having the desires. It's not about feeling loads of shame around having these desires. It's just your neural pathways are wired in a certain way, and it's probably happened to you really from, like, a very, very young age. Maybe 11 or 12, you start watching porn, you wire these neural pathways where you have these compulsive desires, and then you've not been taught how to actually deal with that moment of compulsive desire, where your mind's just saying all the things like, oh, it's not that bad, it's been stressful, I'm going to start again tomorrow, etc., etc. So it's about learning how to deal with these thoughts in that specific moment, experiencing the desire, experiencing that temporary discomfort without acting on it, and that's how you're going to change the neural pathways. But in the past, because I'd have all this motivation, I'd gone into self-improvement, I sort of thought I was making progress, this weird illusion of progress, but I wasn't actually changing the thing that really required some change, which is the thought patterns. And so I'd stay stuck in this relapse cycle, just having these ups and downs, identifying the triggers, trying to change the triggers while actually changing my thought patterns. I'd have a lot of compassion for myself, so I was completely denying the reality of addiction and how bad the problem was actually impacting my life. And then I'd have all this motivation, excitement, sort of think, okay, let's go on a new streak. I'm going to go on a longer streak. I actually believe that I was making progress by going on longer streaks, even though I was still just in the addiction, just intermittently reinforcing the addictive neural pathways over and over and over for years and years and years, just literally going around in circles. And it was a mess, to be straight. So the three mistakes that I made were basically identifying the triggers, which have nothing to do with the actual problem, which is that moment of compulsive desire, and responding to the thought patterns in particular, because the triggers are always going to happen. Like, there's always going to be triggers, so you're always going to have these desires until you've dealt with the desire directly. The mistake I made was, having this compassion and sort of trying to accept being addicted. Like, that's not going to help you. We don't want to accept being addicted. We want to really make a change here. And third, this motivation, which has nothing to do with the actual moment when you have these thoughts where you really want to engage in the behaviour. And often it's very temporary. It's using willpower. and it's not sustainable at all. Hopefully you can learn something from this. Maybe you relate. Let us know in the comments. Cheers, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.